everyone. Welcome to the Law Firm Reboot podcast. My name is Nick Worker. Now, during this podcast, we'll be featuring recordings of panels that took place live at Answering Legal's 2024 Law Firm Summer Reboot Camp. Before we dive into that recording, I wanted to briefly let you know a little bit about the camp's host, Answering Legal. For those not already familiar, Answering Legal is a 24/7 virtual receptionist service that exclusively works with the legal industry. Whenever lawyers can't get to the phone, our highly trained receptionist team is there to make sure they never miss the new client. Answering Legal now even integrates with your favorite legal softwares and provides a free mobile app. As a thank you for checking out our podcast, we're giving you a special free trial offer of Answering Legal, which includes an additional $300 off of services. To take advantage of this offer, visit answeringlegal.com, book a discovery call with our team, and just let us know you watched our Reboot podcast. Please note that this is a limited time offer. Now, without further ado, let's get to our panel.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mathew Kerbis. I'm the subscription attorney. I am the founding attorney of a law firm called Subscription Attorney LLC, unsurprisingly, and host of the podcast Law Subscribed, where I've had a chance to interview 2 out of our 3 panelists today, and the co-founder and CEO of Paxton. But we have Eddie with us today from Paxton. Well, I'll introduce our guest in a second here. But first, as host of, as like a guest host for Answering Legal, I have some things to run through really quick. So let me just let me get into my host voice here. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Answering Legal's 2024 Law Firm Summer Reboot Camp. I already introduced myself, but now we'll finally get into our guests, and we'll just go in the order that I have them here on screen. So, Damien, how about you go ahead and say hello?
Good. Hi, I'm Damien Riehl. I have 2 hats, one of which is VP of Solutions Champion at VLEX, where I build in the morning and talk about the stuff I built in the afternoon. And then the other hat I wear is with Sally, the legal data standard being used by Thomson Reuters, LexisNexis, VLEX. I manage and net documents to be able to make the legal data interoperable.
All right. Well, welcome and thanks again for joining us. Korin, I've got you up next. Say hello and tell our listeners what you do.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me, Matthew. I teach at UNT Dallas College of Law. I teach AI in the law, generative AI in the law practice technology, which covers all kinds of technology. And I've been teaching legal tech for decades now. I hate to say how many years.
Still one of the most important topics, and I think you won't get any disagreement from us today. Eddie, go ahead, say hello, let everybody know what you do.
Hey everybody, I am Eddie. I am an attorney. Right now I am the product lead at Paxton AI, a legal tech company that focuses on legal research, drafting, and document analysis. And I'm very excited to be here with you all.
All right. Well, as you can tell from the panel that I've been lucky enough to assemble, today we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, in particular, with a focus on GenAI. We're going in depth on GenAI for lawyers, and also for law students, the future lawyers. Since we're going to be talking about that a little bit today too. Thankfully, we have Korin with us, and I've been to a lot of these panels today. If you're on LinkedIn, in the LinkedIn sphere, if you will, you'll see there's a lot of chat going on right now about how there's a lot of misinformation still when it comes to GenAI, how lawyers should or should not be using it. And I think that all kind of starts in law school for the next generation of attorneys. And you don't get a lot of the legal education perspective. So thrilled to have that we could have a little bit of that today here on the panel as well. Let's get started with that. I've talked a little bit about the misuse of AI and the fears sort of around it. Let's start with a specific question, and feel free to elaborate on this for just in general, the misinformation out there. And that is, why should lawyers not use ChatGPT 3.5 to do legal research or draft briefs and expect citations to be correct? Damien, you had the biggest smile, so we're going to start with you.
Good. I'll be smiling a lot then if I get to go first. So I think that there's a lot of things that Steve Schwartz really taught us, one of which is if you use ChatGPT for legal research, that's a really bad idea. And that's because really he was using it as an information retrieval device, which it is not. This is not Google. Google, you ask a question and it will give you 10 blue links that will give you ground truth information. ChatGPT doesn't work that way. ChatGPT is merely making up statistically likely information. Therefore, if you try to get information from ChatGPT like you would from Google, that's a bad idea. Better to use it as retrieval augmented generation. What that means is to be able to put information into ChatGPT. Say, here is the full text of a case. Now analyze this case in the context of my facts. And then the number of hallucinations is next to zero. So the idea is that if you're trying to pull information from ChatGPT, that's a horrible idea. If you push information to ChatGPT and then reason with it, that's a much better idea. And Eddie, I would also say that if you want to be able to use a legal research technology that uses a large language model to do it, I happen to know and build one at VLEX that will do such things, and I know that Paxton AI does similar things.
Yeah, I think sort of to use a very basic analogy, you have to understand what the tools are for, right? So you wouldn't use a screwdriver when you need a hammer. You shouldn't use ChatGPT when you need a legal research tool. And so I think it's really important for practitioners to attend events like this to understand what it is that they're using. These tools are amazing. ChatGPT is an amazing tool. It is very useful for many lawyers, but you have to use it in the right context for the right purpose. A tool like VLEX, a tool like Paxton is really good for legal research. You need to be connected to this corpus of data, like Damien was saying. But I think just at a basic level, what we need to talk about in the profession is how we educate ourselves on what these tools can do and what their limitations are, because nothing's perfect. AI is a big deal. It's a big evolution. It's a big technological shift. But I think that there still requires just some sort of basic discussion here about what it is, what it can do, and what particular tools are good at and bad at. And I think, practitioners have to be responsible for understanding the limitations of what they're using.
And Korin, go ahead.
Oh, I agree with everything that Damien and Eddie just said, of course. And that's one of the things I try to teach my students is knowing what tool to use at what time. I just gave them a recent assignment on using generative AI to create a fact pattern and then draft a complaint off of that fact pattern. It was just a car accident. And then have a different tool, one written for law, right, called AI.law. Sorry, guys, to draft the complaint, and then go to Lexis or Westlaw or a different database and find a draft complaint, right, a form complaint, and then compare the three. And they realize that they probably should not rely on even Claude, which is my favorite GenAI, right? Should not rely on Claude or on GPT-4o in order to draft complaints. But they learned some things that it did a little bit better. They liked the narrative a little bit better. So they thought that at the end of it, they would borrow pieces from all three. But they knew that that was not the right tool to be able to do everything. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to stress is you have to pick the right tool and to tell them the difference between generative AI, extractive AI, predictive AI, that there are different tools for different things that you need to accomplish.
And if I could add on that, I think I 100% agree with Korin. And I would also say that with Eddie's note that AI is not perfect, and so you have to understand the limitations. It's also important to understand that humans similarly are not perfect. With any data science question, the question is always compared to what? So you want to say AI compared to the first year associate or AI compared to the junior partner, right? So compared to what is really the question to be able to do. And then if you think about that lens compared to what, there is, like with VLEX, we have over 1 billion legal documents, cases, statutes, regulations, motions, briefs, pleadings, complaints, answers, right? So we have all of this that we can then put into the large language model. And whenever you ask a legal research question, what we will do is we will be able to say, let's search through that corpus of hundreds of millions of documents, find the ones that are most relevant, read through that case, answer how that case answers this question, then also read through all the cases that case cites going down the tree. We also say, give me all the cases that cite that case going up the tree. So 200 cases might cite that case, and that case might cite 35 cases. So we go and search through 235 cases that go beyond that case that you found. And then we put everything into a memorandum in less than 2 minutes. So how many humans are going to read through a case, Smith v. Jones, read through the 35 cases that Smith v. Jones cites, the 235 cases that cite Smith v. Jones, and turn around a memo in about 2 minutes? Zero humans can do that. So really, this is always compared to what? So ask ChatGPT that question, it's going to hallucinate. Ask Felix Vincent that question, and it's going to give you ground truth data because we give you the ground truth cases.
Something that you said, Korin, that I want to that I'm curious about though too is how you're like your students anyway, they're paying to be there, so they are sort of forced to listen to you, and you're obviously giving them some really good assignments. For lawyers, we hear that some lawyers heard about what happened in New York and with Michael Cohen's lawyers, and they're just like, well, obviously GenAI doesn't work for legal research, so I'm never going to touch it, I'm never going to use it. Are you getting similar trepidation from law students? Are they hearing those same stories, and what's been their response?
Yes, absolutely. They are. But this semester, I always do a survey before class to find out what their use is of generative AI platforms. And 2/3 of them, I would say, have never used it. A couple, maybe another of my students, maybe another a little bit of students have done some use of it, but they didn't like the results. They weren't very impressed by it because they're using GPT 3.5, right? They're not and they don't know how to prompt. They don't know how to use it, and they don't understand what the tool is actually doing. Some of them feel like it's cheating. They're afraid to violate the honor code. They've heard that from their other professors, particularly the legal writing faculty. And they're afraid of it and I see that with a lot of attorneys. So I'm speaking to a law firm next week, to their litigation team. I'll be speaking to their commercial practice team in about a month. I'm talking to the local bar associations to try to get them over the hurdle of fear by trying to explain to them how these platforms actually work. But as they start using it, so I had a few students at the beginning of this semester in my Intro to Generative AI class who were absolutely dead set afraid of it, but thought that they needed to know how it worked. And now they are the expert in the firms where they are interning. They use it all the time, not just for law, but for life. I tell them about, if you have a couple of ingredients and you need a recipe real quick, just do that, right? Creating games and simulations and all that kind of stuff, and definitely using it for study, right? So setting up a tutor in different classes, setting up a negotiation simulation, looking for applying for a job and setting up an interviewing simulation, bringing in the job description and their cover letter and their resume using RAG, right? And then having an interview session. So they're using it in all different ways. And now finally, sorry for the long-winded answer. Finally, though, the administrative staff is now asking me for a workshop on how I can help them streamline their own work. And the faculty are opening up a little bit more than they were last year. That's for sure.
Well, I'm thrilled to hear that for all our sakes, because I even spun up a quick website, legalextern.com, and I'm looking for law students learning how to use GenAI because they're because of professors like you, and they have less functional fixedness with the way law needs to happen and the practice of law needs to be. Eddie, going to you, I know that Paxton actually has focused a little bit on the student market, and that you have your freemium, you could just try it out for free pricing, but that you also have student specific pricing for students to try it out. So what has been sort of that thought process behind wanting to get students hands on it? And I'm also curious to hear if of the students using it, what are you seeing from them? Are you seeing in what ways have they been using it, maybe that differ from attorneys, if you can see, because I know y'all take privacy very seriously with being able to see what folks are actually doing and all that.
Yeah. Thanks for it's a great question. I think from our end, so we do have a lot of students using the platform. They're using it in a huge variety of ways. So some students are uploading materials from assignments, say law review articles or cases, and then they are sort of talking to those documents, and that's a much more interactive way of learning than the relatively passive way of sitting there and reading and maybe even highlighting. We have students that are using Paxton for their legal research and writing classes to sort of help them throughout the life cycle of their assignment, right? So from the very sort of onset of writing an outline, sometimes even a step back and saying like, what is a brief, or what does an appellate brief look like, or what should I include in my appellate brief? Things that they might get from their class and things that they might need some additional time to go over. We have some enthusiastic students from, I think what's really interesting from our perspective is how GenAI tools, Paxton in particular, seems to go viral in sort of pockets. So when we have one student, we have lots of schools where there's maybe one or two students, and then there are some schools where there are really lots of students, and that's typically because of professors like Korin who are promoting this in their classroom, allowing folks to try different products, or we have some evangelist users who just like to spread it amongst their friends. But I think generally the uses focus more on they're fairly varied, and I think that they reflect pretty accurately what law school is like, which of course doesn't always reflect very accurately what legal practice is like. But there's a good variety of what folks are doing with it. And I think it's pretty exciting. I think it's a really good opportunity for students to some of the best advice that people can give young lawyers is to find a niche and become a master in it. I think GenAI offers an opportunity for students to become masters of something really important, a really important technology, right? So if you are the go-to person who is using Paxton or is using VLEX at your firm, I think you become very, very valuable in the same way that in generations past, people who were expert in e-discovery tools or, in different kind of redlining tools or whatever it might be, have kind of created a foothold and a stake on which to, kind of grow their personal brand inside the firm. So I really encourage, we're really encouraged by the usage from students, and I really encourage if there are students on this to test out as many tools as you can and try to have that knowledge when you're going into practice.
So going over to Damien next, and Damien, also feel free to share any perspective you have from students using the VLEX platform and all that. But I'm particularly curious to know, because for those who are attending here today or who listen to this, in the future, they're clearly interested in educating themselves as attorneys in learning. So we've talked a little bit about how students are using GenAI and learning how to use it. But where do lawyers go? And Korin, I also want to hear next from you on where you're learning all this stuff. But for any of us who are trying to learn anything, we've probably seen you, Damien, speak at 20 different events. So you're part of the you're part of the answers. Just search Damien and go look where he's speaking and you learn. So, but part of that I want to take away too, though, is Damien, is where are you even finding these speaking opportunities? Where can, lawyers go? And what have been some of the most interesting questions you've maybe received from attendees that you've had to answer, as opposed to obviously talking about the importance of RAG again and again and again at all these events?
Sure. So the way that I get these speaking gigs is in contrast to the way that this happened pre-pandemic, pre-large language model. If I wanted to go to a bar association and say, hey, I want to talk about AI, they'd be say, no, we don't need to talk about AI, forget about it. That was pre-pandemic. But now bar associations say, hey, Damien, will you speak at our event? I say, I just don't have time. They say, we'll pay for your flight. We'll pay for your hotel. Please, please, please do this. So this is a dramatic shift from pre-pandemic, pre-large language model to now all the bar associations are like, yes, we need to talk about this. So the demand for this is huge for obvious reasons. And I want to build upon what Eddie mentioned earlier, which I think is absolutely true, that for young lawyers and for law students, you need to be able to know this technology, because this will be the air that we breathe for the rest of your career. So this is not something that is a flash in the pan. This will be, it'll be like electricity, where people, are today saying, does it have AI in it? And that's going to seem as stupid as saying, does it have electricity in it? Well, yes, of course, the tool uses electricity. That's a given. What does the tool do, right? So in the same way, you need to know how to use electricity. You need to know how to use the large language model to do your work better, because every single thing a lawyer does is ingesting words, analyzing words, and outputting words. And large language models do all three of those things at superhuman speed and at currently a postgraduate level. And the technology is getting better every day. So use the tools, because you're going to be living with it forever. And I would say that going even beyond Eddie's point about e-discovery, I started practicing law in 2019. 1999 actually. So it's been a long time. When I first started, that's when the ascendance of e-discovery came. And because I was a tech savvy lawyer, I've been a coder since '85. I thought maybe this is my niche, right? Maybe I could be able to do e-discovery and be able to hop on the e-discovery train. But very quickly, I realized that e-discovery is kind of a race to the bottom. At least it's been seen as a race to the bottom, where it's been commoditized, and people who became e-discovery experts really were just seen as, oh, they just do the plumbing of getting the documents into the system. They don't really do the substantive legal work like I, as a senior partner, do. So anyway, so if you chased e-discovery as a field, your career is going downward. But I would say that with large language models, it's the exact opposite. Because large language models are truly the work of the lawyer. You can draft complaints, answers, briefs, pleadings, motions, ask your clients questions, do a deal, figure out what is the way to best negotiate. Every single thing a lawyer does is a large language model is capable of doing. So in this way, now you're able to do every substantive task, which means that you're going to be more valuable than the e-discovery in the past. So to your actual question, what do you do to educate yourselves? Follow people that matter. Follow people that know what they're talking about on LinkedIn. Twitter used to be, and sadly now X used to be the place to go, but I think everything's migrated these days to LinkedIn. So follow on LinkedIn. There's lots of Ethan Mollick is somebody who's a Wharton professor of business who has really smart things to say about how large language models apply to all business aspects. And you can say, well, if it applies this way in business, maybe it applies that way in law. So Ethan Mollick is amazing, and other luminaries, I would follow them.
Yeah, I would agree with what Damien said. I was going to mention Ethan Mollick. I've borrowed some of his prompts. I follow him on Twitter. He does a lot of great stuff. I look at LinkedIn. There's an AI law professors group that was formed by Daniel Lina at Northwestern and April Dawson. I believe she's at NCCU. And that's got about 150 law professors around the country that are part of it. Not everybody's teaching AI in the law classes, but there are a lot of people who want to teach. So that we're learning from each other on what kind of lessons to give, what's really effective. I know there's a group of legal writing professors that I go to. They have conversations about every month, and they try out different exercises on each other. They've often said that they set up an exercise last spring and tried it again while preparing for the fall semester, and now that's no longer works because the AI has improved so much, so it doesn't make the mistakes that it was making in the past. One thing that Ethan Mollick said that I tell my students all the time is that this is the worst generative AI you will ever use, right? Which is a really great statement, because every single day I figure out different ways to use it, or I just think of different ways. One of the things that I did a session for law professors on how to use generative AI to create assessments, right? To use RAG, upload all their notes. It'll create multiple choice questions. What you tell it to put in a fact pattern with it, not just have just a generic question, write essay questions, provide model answers. I mean, it saves an unbelievable amount of time. And then to create simulations and to create all other kinds of things that you might not have ever introduced into your class because you weren't really sure how to do. But were kind of afraid to ask other professors because you thought you should have known how to do it, but just to come up with different exercises for that. It's really helped me this semester in the intro to generative AI, coming up with different prompt assignments. I want them to become expert prompters. And so coming up with ways to teach them how to prompt in a more effective way to get a better response. GenAI help with that. So, with LinkedIn, with people like Damien, which I told him at the beginning before were online, that I saw him at a conference talking about Sally and was mesmerized. I just thought it was fascinating what he's doing as a law librarian. He really spoke to me about taxonomies. I don't know how people get interested in taxonomies like we do. But regardless, there's so many different resources. There are books being written about integrating AI into teaching, and the adoption rate has just really gone up considerably just in the last year. It's amazing.
I mean, all great recommendations. I've been reading Ethan's stuff a little bit too. I saw we got some questions here in the chat, so I figured why not just dive into that really quick. So we did get a question much earlier about getting clients using GenAI, and I think there's a marketing talk either later today or later on that I'm sure they'll be incorporating GenAI in that conversation. So stay tuned for that. We got another question here about, in general, people. Maybe that's clients, maybe that's lawyers. I don't know, this is from Manesh, but we could talk to both clients and lawyers, and even students, how they've lost trust in AI, sort of maybe because of these things. And we maybe touched on this a little bit earlier, but the question is, like, what can we do other than like having a panel here today? Like, what can we do? And Eddie, since we haven't heard from you most recently, we could start with you on this. Like, what can we do? And what is Paxton doing to like increase awareness and education about why not to be afraid of AI?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really important point. Lawyers, I think, tend to be skeptical generally. How we address this at Paxton is by letting people use the tool. So you could sign up, you get a free trial. It's really accessible, extremely easy. And we favor transparency in pretty much every interaction users have with the product. So we're constantly footnoting the responses, so you can very easily click on the footnote and check where the source text comes from and what it says, and you can compare one-to-one. These things are right next to each other. But primarily, I think it's just about using the tools, right? I think, it's very easy in the abstract to criticize AI, to read about the sensational type stories, somebody getting sanctioned for, citing hallucinated cases, that sort of thing. I think the best way to address that is to just have lawyers, have clients, have some more familiarity with the tools, because they really are amazing, and they're improving constantly, right? So if you ask a question in Paxton and you have typically what we do is we ask the lawyers that we're talking to ask a question on a topic that they know about, right? So they can very quickly assess the quality of the response. Typically, that almost immediately addresses the concern, right? I'm not saying we're in every case we are as accurate as a 40-year practitioner, but I am saying pretty much from the first use, folks can see that the response quality is quite good, that the sources are footnoted, that you can very easily cross-reference between products, and that generally promotes trust. And I think just transparency is generally a really important point when we're trying to talk about GenAI and promoting a new tool in the legal industry.
I think accessibility is super important, actually. And I use a lot of GenAI tools. Full transparency, I am a customer of Paxton. But one of the things that I do is I will suggest to potential clients that, like, hey, I am using AI. Like, it's in my market. Like, one of the reasons I could offer such affordable pricing is I'm using AI. And I will just say, like, one of the tools I use is Paxton. Go try it out. And just, like, that is a way that, like, I'm even using it in, like, lead gen or like business development of like, here, this is the tool I'm using. Yeah, you could go use it yourself. And to talk about Damien's example of looking at Ethan in the business space, like, I'll give you an analogy here. I had to replace my furnace in the winter a couple of years ago. I mean, that's a good business to be in. Sell heat in the cold. And so after the guy installed it, he did a fantastic job. I felt like I got a good price for the service I received. And then he started to explain to me and educate me all about how to keep it clean and maintain it. And it was so detailed and thorough. I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to hire you to do that, right? And so the same way, it's like, yes, I could give them a tool like Paxton, and they can maybe get some interesting results, and they could play around with it, and they could see how it works. But for the deeper, more important, like, risk-related legal things, and I'm in transactional law too. Like, I don't do anything litigation-related. So, like, it's usually like they're asking questions about a contract, or they're asking questions about a situation into Paxton. And they still want that, like, legal touch from a lawyer and an expert in the subject, right? But, like, having that accessibility of even letting the clients play with the tool, I never thought about. This is why I'm so glad I'm hosting this panel today, because I never thought about it from that perspective. If that's one of the ways we could get, even on the client side, them more used to this idea of AI, is to just let them play around with the tools. Damien, go ahead. I could see you're itching to go on this.
Man, am I ever itching? Yeah, I think that there's really, since part of my job is educating about such things, there is a good saying out there that the best education is using it. You can imagine if I want to learn how to swim, I could go on 20 courses about swimming. I could read 30 books about swimming, and that's not really going to help me swim. Really what you need to do is be able to use the large language model to test its boundaries, to see what it's good at, see what it's maybe not as good at today. And then once you've dipped your toes in the ChatGPT or Claude or Anthropic waters, then move on to maybe a fit for purpose legal tool like Paxton or VLEX. And so then when you say, okay, this is what ChatGPT gives me, which is awful for legal research questions, then you could be able to say, well, cool, maybe for legal research, when we think about what is legal research, it goes back to people say you're selling drills, but really what people want is the whole. Legal research is a drill. What is the whole? The brief that I'm writing, or the memo I'm writing to the client, or the whatever is the endpoint of this thing. So large language models are not only able to give you the whole, they can give you the whole house. That is, they can build the house, and then you can edit that brief, edit that complaint, edit that answer. So it moves from a drill to an actual entire thing. And to give an example of that, if you right now in VLEX Vincent upload a complaint, we will give you 25 buttons, no prompting necessary. Those 25 buttons reflect what I as a litigator did for every single complaint. What are the claims being alleged? What are the facts supporting those claims? What are they looking for? Are they looking for relief? Are they looking for money? Are they looking for an injunction? Who are the parties and who are they related to? So those are all extracted from the complaint. And then the next step, we go beyond extraction to ideation to be able to say, what legal defenses should I mount? What questions should I ask my client to help them win? Those two things are actually legal work that is starting to build the house. So, and then you as a small lawyer might go to your document management system saying, what are some things like this that I've done in the past that maybe I can apply here? We go better than that, where we have 800 million dockets and documents from every single federal court and 38 state courts. So we will go through those 800 million documents and find the 20 document cases that are just like yours. So you can copy and paste from the complaint, from the answer. And then we provide you legal research questions, no prompting necessary, where we'll look at the complaint and say, here are 3 legal research questions that maybe you didn't even think of that might be good to answer for this complaint. No prompting necessary. So the idea is that if I'm doing my job, you don't have to be a prompt engineer. If I'm doing my job, you just upload a complaint and it spits out 200 plus pages of content. That is good content, much like a first or fifth or 8th year associate might put out. So then when that happens, think about what that happens to the business model. So right now, I sell to law firms. I also sell to in-house counsel, Fortune 20 companies. And those Fortune 20 companies in-house counsel say, this is amazing. We're going to do 2 things. Thing number 1 is we're going to take complaints that we received over the last year, and we're going to upload those to Vincent. Then we're going to take the 200 pages that we received and then compare that to what our lawyers did. And then we're going to say, what did the lawyers add on top of those 200 pages, if anything? If the answer is nothing, that's going to say something. Then they're going to say, what did those 200 pages have that we wish our lawyers had provided us? If the answer is a lot, that's going to say something. And then going forward, they say what we're going to do when we receive a new complaint, before we give that complaint to our lawyers, we're going to run it through Vincent. We're going to take those 200 pages that it gives, give those to our lawyers, and then say to our lawyers, what can you do on top of those 200 pages? Because that's all we're going to pay you for. We're not going to pay you to recreate that 200-page wheel. This is the worst the technology will ever be. And the in-house Fortune 20 companies have said, now that really changes the entire dynamic between me as a client and you as an external lawyer. Because today, as a client, I get sued, I get a complaint. I don't have 50, 60, 70 hours to be able to make those 200 pages. So I give that to my external counsel. They let a bunch of associates churn on that for 80 hours, and then they come back to me with an answer. And I, as in-house counsel, have to defer to you because you did the work. I didn't do the work, right? Those are the old days. But he said, Vincent really flips that on its head because now I get the complaint. I get the benefit of the 200 pages. So now I give those 200 pages and say, hey, external counsel, what can you do on top of this? You and I are on the same page. I don't have to defer to you because you and I know the same thing. Give me what you got. This transforms fundamentally the relationship between the client and the lawyer.
And I mean, Korin, correct me if I'm wrong, but like this is why the legal writing instructors and professors are terrified, right? It's just totally upending the way that they were teaching the next lawyers how to do things, right?
Exactly. But one of the things that I've been able to convert people, and that's when I'm an evangelist at the law school, I'm an evangelist everywhere I go about using these platforms, um, is the use cases, which I think Eddie was talking about, right? And Damien. And when you identify what it is that they need to get done in their daily lives, whether they're a law student or they're a lawyer, um, and identify how generative AI can help them, that's what sparks the interest. Because if they don't have somebody who's showing them how it can really benefit them, they're staring at a screen and they really don't know what to do, right? They're just kind of stuck there. So you need to get somebody who can guide them at first and then light the fire, light the spark, right? And then all of a sudden you see them, like you can almost see the light bulb go on, right? You can see them, oh, this is how I can use it. And then, they become, like my students are becoming the experts at the different firms and agencies where they were interning. And they're teaching other people how to do it, which is how it's supposed to work, right? They become the experts and then they can teach others. One of the things that I spoke at the State Bar Association of Texas last summer, sometime last year. And from that, the incoming president of the Dallas Bar Association has created a committee that I'm on to organize a symposium for lawyers on all aspects of just generative AI, not AI overall, but just generative AI. And the first session is the one I'm doing, which is going to be what it does and how it does it, right? So I think in order to understand what these tools can do and what they can do exceptionally well, you have to understand the concept behind what an LLM is, right? Where it got trained, how it got trained, and that it's not, like Damien said at the very beginning, it's not extracting knowledge and creating it for you, right? Or reporting it to you, right? It's generating based on a statistical model of how words flow and how language is used, right? Once they kind of get the idea that it's not like Lexis or Westlaw, right? Once they kind of get that idea behind them, or Google, and understand that what it's doing is generative, they're much more inclined to think, to think differently about how using the tool. And once you give them a few use cases, then that kind of gets them off and running.
Speaking of use cases, Damien did give some great examples of VLEX a second ago, and Eddie, you've already talked about law students. Now, Eddie, I want to hear from you on how you're seeing lawyers use Paxton and specific use cases and examples of that.
Yeah, so tons of different use cases. We have transactional lawyers and litigators and regulatory lawyers, lawyers of all types on the platform. We do all sorts of legal research. We find that people like the kind of back and forth interface, so we allow for long chats. Typically, the most successful research questions come from iterative type questions. So you start with a little bit of context. You ask Paxton to provide an outline or to ask questions that you might need, and then that it might need to better understand what it is that you're looking for. And then you build from there. So you go from, sort of ideation to outline to kind of drafting of whatever it is that you're looking for. Typically kind of a response to a discrete question, either in memo form or, in just sort of email form. And you can ask Paxton to draft it however you want. We've had folks have a lot of success in the transactional side with putting in contract language and simplifying it. That's one of my favorite use cases. I typically like working with more plain language type documents, right? So that the client can actually read them and understand what is being agreed to, as opposed to the lawyers having, holding all this knowledge. So we have a lot of lawyers that are using Paxton to streamline the contracts that they've already been using in their practice, right? So you have, for example, an employment agreement that you've been working with, and you just want to make it much simpler. You want to cut it down in length. You want to cut it down in terms of the jargon in that document. You can copy and paste different language from your document, upload your document, and then ask Paxton to simplify it. You can give it particular instructions. People say, make this readable at a 5th grade level. You can say, make this college level. You could say, I'm an attorney, use whatever language you want. There's a lot of flexibility there. I think those are some of the most common use cases. Folks also really like working with their own documents, which is something we make really easy. So you can upload your own, for example, your own, complaints. Say you're a personal injury lawyer, you file a lot of complaints. You can upload your complaints, ask Paxton to help you revise the draft with new contextual information that you've put in, right? So you say, here's the complaint. I am now representing, Mathew Kerbis instead of Damien Riehl, and the injury was this or that, and you can kind of edit your document extremely quickly. This is very tedious work that otherwise takes hours and takes a really well-trained support staff, associate or paralegal, that now gets streamlined into minutes. So those are some of the most common use cases, I would say. We're building out a ton of new functionality, which I am not yet at liberty to discuss, but I think folks will see in the next few weeks. And so, look out for that, for our new announcements. I think people are going to be really excited and happy about it. But typically, I think the tools are more advanced than people's imagination. So that's something that we like to stress. We have, I personally do a lot of like customer success calls. I'm product lead. I like to be really close to our users and really understand what it is that they're using it for and what they want to be using it for. And typically, folks actually can do what they want. They just haven't thought of exactly how to do it. And so the, generative AI is quite good at many legal tasks. It's probabilistic thinking, just like attorneys tend to be. Attorneys don't self-identify that way, right? But we always use words like it depends, or this will likely happen, or will likely not happen. And so GenAI is really good at acting in the same way, reasoning in the same way that lawyers do. And so I think, the use cases are as varied as the practice areas they are that exist. And typically, I think the most folks who are getting the most value out of Paxton are using it in a ton of different ways. In some ways, sometimes our users kind of surprise me, right? Like the iterative prompting. I didn't invent that. We didn't invent that. That was kind of suggested to us by a power user, right? So I think another kind of pro from the sort of widely accessible approach is that we get super rapid user feedback, and folks can kind of teach us about our tool just as much as we're out there trying to educate lawyers about the tool.
So reading between the lines here, what Damien and Eddie are saying is things are not taking a lot of time anymore. Oh, gee, I wonder if there's a podcast dedicated to the subject on like the end of the billable hour. Speaking of, for those, we don't have time to cover all that today, but episode 57 of Law Subscribed is when Damien came on. Episode 59 is when Tungi Chow of Paxton came on. And then episode 73 is with Korin. I'll post links to those attending here today. But those, definitely go check those out if you want to hear that kind of conversation with today's guests. With that, though, like we'll sort of wrap up here. We only have about 15 minutes left. And I want to talk about predictions on the future of what the legal profession looks like. So maybe related to the way lawyers make money, but more focused on the GenAI of it all. And also another thread that I heard coming out of that last conversation was working with these tools like you'd work with team members, which I think emphasizes, just going into the education side of it too, with Korin and other law professors, is the skills that we're learning in law school to be like the core skills of communication and delegating and leadership and working with a team and things like that. Like those skills help not only with working with humans, but it sounds to me like interfacing with Vincent and Paxton to make the outcome of these tools even better. And in that regard, there's different hammers for different types of nails for different types of contexts, right? So, if you're a lawyer that doesn't want to do any prompting, it sounds like Vincent maybe took care of that for you. And Damien, I'm sure you haven't gotten completely rid of custom prompting if somebody wants to do that in the tool, right?
That's 100% right. Yeah, if they want to prompt, you can prompt all the way. But if I'm doing my job correctly, every prompt that you would have put in there, I have as a button, so you don't have to worry about it.
Right. So let's do this. So let's talk about predictions on the way you think GenAI will change the future of law, the future of legal practice, the future of legal education. I know you do a lot of speaking and thinking about this, Damien, so we're going to start with you, and then we'll go to Korin, and then we'll go to Eddie, and this will be how we round it out.
That sounds great. So, I think that, Yogi Berra said predictions are hard, especially about the future. So that I would say that, that predictions are hard, but let's jump into it. I think one prediction is that if, a lot of lawyers have said that the complaint analysis that I talked about earlier is about 70 or 80 hours worth of work that is done in 2 minutes. It's hard to see that at some point the billable hour will go away. because the clients are not going to put up with you spending 80 hours on something that they can get in 2 minutes. So whether that time horizon is 1 year, 5 years, 50 years, right? We can argue about the time horizon, but the inevitability of the billable hour going away, I think, is certain. So now let's assume that the billable hour goes away. Then you can think about shrinking of cost. Matthew knows this better than anybody, but if you think of this like in any other business, if you have revenue minus cost equals profit margin, then if you shrink your cost, you increase your profit margin. So now if I can be able to use 2 minutes rather than 80 hours, my costs go down and I can make way more money. So now I, as a lawyer, make more money than maybe I did in the pre-flat fee. And then certainly I'm preaching to the Mathew Kerbis choir here, but that's I think inevitably where this goes. And then what happens on the buy side, on the client side? So now that in the old world, I as a client am thinking about calling a lawyer that bills by the hour, but I know as soon as that lawyer picks up the phone, I'm faced with at least a bill of $500, maybe $1,000, maybe $3,000, right? I don't want to do that. So, it's not even worth it. I'm not even calling that lawyer. What if that $1,000 or $500 turns into $50? Oh yeah, I'm going to call that lawyer. And then I'm going to call, and that lawyer is going to use AI to be able to spend only $10 worth of costs. Right? And now I'm going to call that lawyer all the time. And then maybe in the aggregate, I make more money than I would have in the old world. And that's what's called Jevons paradox. Jevons paradox is the smaller the unit cost of work, the more that we actually use of the thing. So an example is LED light bulbs. We thought they were going to save us a lot of energy, but it's so cheap, we just leave them on all the time. The cheaper the unit cost, the more we use of it. So what if legal costs were so cheap that society uses way more law? And then the 92% of legal needs that are unmet because we lawyers are too expensive, all of a sudden we become more affordable. And those 92%, we can tap that market. Economists would call that 92% an untapped market. So if we can tap that with large language models, we can, one, solve the access to justice crisis, two, make a ton more money than we are right now. So I think that, predictions are hard, but I would say that flat fees are going to be the norm. And we're going to fight the access to justice problem and be able to maybe make more money in the process.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing about the access to justice problem. That's what I'm hoping that, and I'm working with our clinical director of experiential learning, Cheryl Watley, on developing some self-help tools with the use of generative AI, like just to solve problems that are enormously important to families, like claiming land and all kinds of things, child support issues and things like that. So in order to just solve that market that was solved by maybe LegalZoom, but it was getting a lot of trouble for unauthorized practice of law. And there are those issues with UPL when it comes to generative AI, but helping at least address some of the issues that we think we can do that just requires filling out a form, like getting your driver's license back or getting, a government ID restored or whatever it is. And walking people through the process, I think is hugely important. As far as bar associations have a duty for reasonableness of fees. There's at least one Canadian judge who has said not using generative AI to save money for a client is a violation of that. And there are judges now talking more and more often about it. There was a judge in, I think, California, who was talking about how he used generative AI in order to work through an issue in a contract when he was trying to figure out what does landscaping include a pool that's been turned into a trampoline. All kinds of interesting prospects of how people are using this. For legal education, I think the adoption rate is going to soar in the next year because I think slowly people are hearing from other professors when they're attending conferences this summer about how they're using generative AI to make their life simpler, to create more robust exercises, and how students are already using it. So they better start using it themselves, right? Having honor code violations and trying to enforce not using it or trying to use a detection tool to try to uncover the use of generative AI is just futile, right? You can't detect. And so I just think that over the course of the next year or two, we'll see greater adoption in law schools and we'll see students who are graduating with those skills. As far as the practice of law goes, I'm hoping that we solve access to justice problems, but I don't know because every day, every month you turn around, something new has been added. Like Eddie is holding back on us and not telling us what his new release is going to bring. We don't know. We don't know where it's going. It's just fascinating. It's a fascinating time in legal tech, and one that actually I've been pushing for years that law schools need to teach legal tech as a requirement and have never been able to get people on board. And now with this technology, I think finally schools are realizing it's got to be part of the curriculum, not just in one-off classes, but also part of the doctrinal classes, creating exercises to use it, and really open students up to the idea of using this to do more creative work and get, what you would give to an assistant off your plate so that you can do more creative lawyering.
Yeah. Eddie?
Yeah, great prediction so far. It's tough act to follow. I'll start with the more discrete thought, which is that I think the direction we're going in terms of AI, not just in the legal tech space, but just more broadly, is towards agentic AI. So it's not going to be about prompt engineering. It's not going to be about selecting from a menu of options. It will feel more magical, and the AI will be able to, it will feel like it's reading your mind, right? So you will ask some broad, sort of misformed question, and the AI will act in the same way that an expert counselor will act. It'll ask you questions, it'll get more context, it'll try to understand the deeper values or the deeper meaning behind what it is that you're saying. Are you telling the full story? All of these things will become possible. And I think are already possible. And so we're going to move towards that kind of user experience where the AI is doing a lot behind the scenes, but it's going to feel really simple. It's going to feel really delightful, really intuitive, and almost magical. So I think agentic AI is really close. And I think that's sort of the next iteration of the tools, both in legal and outside of legal. Then I think we are also going to move towards personalized AI. So, for example, you can imagine lawyers loading up all of their knowledge into the Korin bot so that you can provide 24/7 service to your clients with a lawyer in the loop, but you are not actually 24/7 on call. You have just made your mind available to your clients in the way that they expect, in the way that they demand, but that doesn't actually require this kind of 24/7 availability, which I think in some practice areas among some firms is sort of the standard now, right? So that's going to take a lot more customization. That'll take a lot more work sort of on the back end to create memory, to silo different confidential information. There's tons that needs to be done before that becomes reality, but I think these are not unsolvable technical challenges, and I think we're going to move towards that kind of hyper personalization. I think that'll happen in the professional sphere where I can give my advice as an attorney, and I think it'll happen in all sorts of creative spheres as well, right? Like I can create video, Instagram content without ever having to record a video. And then,
but only AI will be watching it because we'll all have agentic AI.
Yes. Yeah. My AI will only like videos so that, when I go on my algorithm every once in a while, it promotes the videos that I like.
And I'll tell you what, it makes a great subscriber benefit, Eddie, the personalized thing that you said. So like for lawyers like me who are using the subscription model, I cannot wait for that to come to fruition. And so I'll give you, sorry, I interrupted you. So I'll give you another couple of minutes to wrap up. Any more predictions? Are you good?
I think I just would echo the last point on the access to justice piece, which is that I think we will see a lot of, right now, it's just the truth of the matter that a lot of legal work is not being done by lawyers. It's either not being done at all or being handled by folks themselves. So sort of segueing into the UPL, the unauthorized practice of law discussion, I think it's a really important one. I think there's a ton of need. And the profession has done a really good job of gatekeeping knowledge and gatekeeping access. And, that creates, supply problems, which raise prices. But I think we will move towards a world where there is we have to relax the idea of what is UPL. Making certain forms available for folks to fill out themselves and having them have a guided AI experience to answer basic questions. For example, if you are creating a will or probating an estate, these are relatively form-based practice areas where I think it's, almost everyone should have a will, and folks will deal with probate, right? And so these kinds of areas are going to become more democratized. You don't need to, it's great to have a lawyer in the loop if you want to and if you can afford to. But otherwise, I think AI will make these things a lot more accessible. And then I think it'll just go up the chain from there in terms of the complexity of work. But I think we'll start with the most consumer-facing type work, the most commonly needed type work. And then we will move towards the more sophisticated, the more bespoke, maybe in the model that I was talking about with kind of AI lawyers, making available their knowledge to the more sophisticated customers. But yeah, that's where I see this moving. And I think the UPL laws will have to move as the technology will demand it, I think.
So take us home, Damien. And then we'll hear from Korin. But Damien's been go ahead.
No,
UPL.
I was just going to second everything that Eddie just said.
Good.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay.
So, and I will also agree with Eddie, and I will add 3 points. Number one, there is an upsolve case in New York City where a federal district court has said that practicing legal advice is free speech. And any UPL law infringed free speech. That is what a federal court said. It's now being appealed to the Second Circuit. North Carolina has a similar case where the unauthorized practice of engineering, again, that district court said that is free speech. And so that is also being appealed. That's thing number one. Thing number two is ostensibly UPL laws are to protect the public. We already have things like that, and those are advertising laws. Those are negligence laws. There are all sorts of common law causes of action to be able to protect the public. And if you imagine a bar going after a small company for UPL to do that, you can imagine that if the purpose of UPL is to protect the public, shouldn't they also be going after ChatGPT, where you can say draft a motion to dismiss for breach of contract in the Southern District of New York? Is that not also the unauthorized practice of law? And if that bar association is going to sue that tiny company and not Google and not OpenAI and not Microsoft, the biggest market cap in the world, then isn't it just a charade that we're actually trying to protect the public? Because how much bigger reach does Microsoft and Google and OpenAI have than that tiny company that you're suing? So that's thing number two. Thing number three is if I'm that tiny company that gets sued for the unauthorized practice of law, I as the defense lawyer would of course bring in OpenAI and bring in Microsoft, I'm using their platform, and bring in Amazon using their platform, and bring in Apple using their platform, and bring in Google because I'm using Gemini. So now these are also third-party defendants. And if you don't think that those deep-pocketed lawyers will have good arguments about how the unauthorized practice of law statutes are infringing on free speech and are otherwise not really protecting the public, what bar association is going to go after Microsoft and Apple? So those are all 3 ways to be able to say maybe the unauthorized practice of law statutes have never been needed, and maybe we can help those 92% of legal needs that are unmet.
I mean, I don't think we're going to get any better than that. But my last 2 cents is if AI can't create copyrights because it's not human, then it's not able to engage in unlicensed practice of law. And I think that's pretty logically consistent.
Excellent.
Of course, there's other issues around like the human who's using the tool to, they should probably still get a copyright interest, but that's a whole other conversation. And then whether we even need to protect that, because if there's going to be millions and billions and trillions of different types of copyrightable things, so like what are we protecting anymore? But thanks to an absolutely stellar panel, thanks to Damien, Korin, Eddie for coming. And if people want to reach out for any reason, we'll just go around the horn one more time. Damien, Korin, then Eddie. How do people reach out to you?
LinkedIn is the best spot.
LinkedIn.
Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. You can email me I'll put my email in the chat. And I encourage folks to sign up for Paxton, paxton.ai. You can try it out. It's really, really easy. It'll take you 2 seconds. In the time that I'm talking right now, you will have already had a Paxton account set up.
By the way, I just want to mention that I do teach both Paxton and VLEX Vincent in my classes, so you get exposure.
Good. Excellent. And I'm Mathew Kerbis. I'm the subscription attorney. Search the subscription attorney to find me on LinkedIn. The podcast is www.lawsubscribed.com. And that is all the time we have today for this discussion. I'd like to thank all my guests for joining me today.